Welcome to the Morning Walk with Murdy Digital Stroll. Picture this. You unlock your phone with the strict intention of checking a quick text from your boss.
Oh yeah, we've all been there. Just a 5-second task.
Right, it's a simple task, you know exactly what you need to do. But then, like 20 minutes later, you are watching a stranger power wash a driveway on a short-form video app.
Or watching someone meticulously restock their fridge, yeah.
Exactly. And you have absolutely no memory of why you picked up your phone in the first place. You're just sitting there staring at the screen, totally caught in a loop.
Completely disconnected from your original goal.
Right. Well, today we are looking at the exact mechanical breakdown in your brain that causes that. And more importantly, the massive, quiet migration happening right now across the internet to escape it.
Because we're seeing a fundamental shift, really, in how people choose to learn and engage. The overarching theme of our sources today is that modern algorithmic feeds are not just distracting, they are intentionally engineered to fragment our cognitive architecture.
Yeah, intentionally being the key word there.
Exactly. And what we're exploring in this deep dive is how deliberate chronological systems are stepping in as a modern sanctuary. It's what we might call the emergence of Gurukul 2.0.
Gurukul 2.0, I like that.
Yeah, it's basically a return to deep, intentional learning spaces that are rooted in ancient oral traditions, but, facilitated by modern technology.
Well, putting my strategic auditor hat on for a second, the data we're looking at today paints a fascinating picture of user behavior. Millions of people are actively changing how they consume media.
They're fleeing the ecosystem.
They are, but to really understand the migration, we have to look at the structural damage they are fleeing. So the source notes from the recent deep dive titled Why Audio Deserves Your Attention Back, supplemented by psychological studies from 2025 and 2026, those provide our blueprint today.
And this is where it gets really personal for anyone listening.
Exactly. To you, the listener, evaluating your own digital habits is crucial here. Because by the end of this deep dive, you'll see why the very act of choosing to listen to this material, like from start to finish, is actually a highly effective defense mechanism.
Yeah, it functions as a structural defense because the default state of the modern digital world fundamentally opposes sustained attention.
It fights against it.
Right. The architecture of platforms hosting short-form video is built entirely around engineered interruption. I mean, they aren't designed to communicate complete ideas at all. They're designed to hijack the brain's novelty-seeking pathways.
Okay, let's unpack this because the mechanics of that are wild. When we analyze short-form video formats, so, TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, from a purely strategic, structural standpoint, the optimization is heavily skewed toward watch time and completion rate.
Just keeping eyes on the screen.
Right. Human comprehension isn't even a metric on the dashboard. They do not care if you understand what you are watching.
Not at all.
The entire user interface is designed to keep you swiping. It's basically a digital casino where the slot machine doesn't pay out in cash. It steals a little bit of your cognitive bandwidth every time you pull the lever.
That is such a good analogy of the slot machine. And we have the hard data to back that up now. If you look at the meta-analysis published in the Psychological Bulletin from January 2026, the scale of this cognitive impact is undeniable.
And this wasn't a small study, right?
No, not at all. We are auditing data from roughly 98,000 participants.
Wow. Wait, 98,000?
Yeah, almost 100,000 people across 71 different studies.
That is massive.
It is, and the sheer volume of that data effectively eliminates the noise of smaller, isolated behavioral studies. When you aggregate 71 studies examining the intersection of short-form video and human cognition, very clear mechanical patterns emerge.
And what did they find?
The findings consistently link heavy short-form video use to weaker attention spans and diminished impulse control.
Diminished impulse control. That explains the infinite scrolling.
Exactly. And the researchers explicitly categorize this as a moderate, meaningful effect. So this moves the conversation entirely out of the realm of fringe theory. It establishes a verifiable cognitive deficit that is occurring on a global scale.
Okay, I want to break down exactly what that cognitive deficit looks like because, we hear the term brain rot thrown around as a joke all the time online.
It's a huge meme.
Right. People say, I scrolled for 3 hours, I have brain rot. But I want to know, is this just hyperbole or are scientists actually measuring a specific loss in brain function?
They are actually measuring it. And the 2025 LMU Munich study, which was then independently replicated in 2026, by the way, points to something highly specific. They focus on a concept called prospective memory.
Prospective memory, okay, if I'm interpreting the research correctly, prospective memory is essentially your brain's sticky note for immediate intentions.
That's a great way to put it.
It's the mechanism that lets you hold on to a thought like, I need to check the weather, while you actually navigate to the app to execute it. And short-form video basically acts like a fan blowing all those sticky notes off your desk.
Yes, that is a perfect visualization of the mechanism. The LNU Munich researchers, they set out to measure why those sticky notes were detaching. And they found that the rapid context switching inherent in short-form video actively overwrites the brain's temporary storage capacity for intentions.
So it's the speed of the switching that does the damage.
Exactly. Think about it. When you swipe from a comedy sketch to a cooking tutorial to a political rant in the span of 30 seconds, your working memory is forced to constantly dump its contents just to process the new high-stimulus environment.
Man, it's like trying to bake a complex cake, but someone runs into the kitchen and aggressively changes the recipe in front of you every 15 seconds.
Right. Now we're making a roast. Now we're making soup.
Exactly. Your brain simply doesn't have the processing time to encode the previous steps. Eventually, your cognitive system just gives up on trying to remember the overarching intention. So, baking the cake, or in our earlier example, sending that text to your boss.
It just surrenders.
Yeah, it defaults to a purely reactive state. You just start dealing with whatever ingredient is shoved into your hands in that exact millisecond.
In that reactive state, that is exactly what users are self-diagnosing as brain rot.
Wow.
Yeah. The researchers are literally quantifying the exact cognitive failure, which is prospective memory degradation, that users already instinctively feel happening to them. When your brain is constantly forced to abandon its internal narrative to process external randomized stimuli, the neural pathways responsible for holding sustained thought, they just begin to weaken.
So if short-form video is actively shattering our prospective memory by forcing this constant hyperactive context switching, the strategic solution isn't just telling people to exercise more willpower.
No, willpower doesn't work against an optimized algorithm.
Willpower is a finite resource. The solution requires a migration to a medium that physically prevents us from skipping around, like a medium that forces a return to linear processing. And based on our sources, that medium is long-form audio.
Yeah, audio provides the structural resistance necessary to rebuild those neural pathways.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
It does. Because to understand why audio works, we have to look at how we process text on digital screens versus how we process the spoken word. When people read text on an algorithmic platform, they rarely engage in deep reading. The platform's interface essentially trains a skip and skim behavior.
Yeah, the mechanics of reading actually facilitate that skimming. When you read text, your eyes can physically jump ahead.
Right, you can skip whole paragraphs.
You use saccades to skip over filler words, hunting for the bolded text or the bullet points or the overarching keyword. But when we skim like that, we are only absorbing surface-level signals. We entirely miss the actual argument. We miss the context, the logical transition from one thought to the next. The comprehension is incredibly shallow.
Which is the exact opposite of audio. The auditory cortex processes information chronologically. You literally cannot process a spoken word before the speaker utters it.
Unless you play it at 3x speed, which is a whole other issue.
Right, but even then, you cannot saccade your way through a podcast. You can't jump mid-sentence. If you want to understand the conclusion of a sentence, your working memory is forced to hold on to the beginning of the sentence and track the syntax in real time.
You have to ride the wave of the sentence.
Exactly. The pacing of your cognition is forced to synchronize with the pacing of the speaker.
So this physically forces the brain into an active, sustained state of attention. It's a biological pacing mechanism.
Yes. Which is the foundation of the Gurukul 2.0 concept we mentioned earlier.
Tell me more about that.
Well, the original Gurukul systems were ancient educational traditions that were heavily reliant on oral transmission. They understood, fundamentally, that deep listening creates a profound relationship with the material.
Because it demands presence.
Right. When you engage with human speech, you aren't just processing raw data. The speaker's natural repetition, the pauses between complex thoughts, the subtle shifts in pitch and vocal emphasis like what we're doing right now.
Yeah, the human element.
These are all auditory cues that the human brain evolved over millennia to use for memory encoding. Flat text on a glowing screen strips away all of that biological context. Audio restores it, which makes it a highly effective vehicle for deep learning.
Now, I do need to push back on the romanticization of audio here for just a second.
Okay, sure.
Because looking at the 2026 update from the conversation that was included in our notes, they highlight some necessary nuance regarding the limitations of the medium.
The mind-wandering aspect.
Yes, exactly. The cognitive scientists they interviewed point out that listening to audio can actually allow for significant mind wandering, potentially even more so than deep reading.
That's true.
Like, if someone is highly literate and sits down in a quiet room with a dense physical book, their factual retention is likely going to be higher than if they are listening to a podcast while, navigating rush hour traffic or folding laundry. The brain will inevitably zone out during audio. Doesn't that contradict the idea of deep focus?
That nuance is absolutely vital, and I concede that.
Yeah.
The research is clear that comprehension outcomes depend heavily on reading fluency and the specific environment. We aren't arguing that listening to a podcast while washing dishes is neurologically superior to the focused, deep reading of a physical text in a silent library.
Right.
The issue, though, is that reading a physical book in a silent library is not the actual alternative most people are faced with in their daily lives.
Oh, I see what you mean. They aren't choosing between War and Peace on a podcast.
Exactly.
They're choosing between a podcast and mindless doom scrolling.
Precisely the point. Audio isn't universally trying to be better than reading a book. It serves as a harm reduction strategy for an attention-compromised culture. If your daily choice is between shattering your prospective memory by rapid-fire swiping through short-form videos, or having your mind occasionally wander while following a long-form linear audio discussion, the cognitive benefits of the audio are vastly superior.
It's infinitely better than the alternative.
Right. It is a bridge back to sustained attention for people whose brains have been explicitly trained to reject the slow pace of a physical book.
That makes profound strategic sense. It's a transitional medium. But, okay, that brings us to a massive structural hurdle in this digital migration.
What's that?
If deep listening audio is the antidote to cognitive fragmentation, the delivery mechanism of that audio becomes the single most important variable.
Oh, the algorithm.
Yeah, because if a user opens an app and relies on a machine learning algorithm to feed them disjointed audio clips, they are stepping right back into the same structural trap. The medium might be different, but the master is the same.
What's fascinating here is how tech companies have successfully and honestly, dangerously redefined the concept of discovery.
They really have.
They sell the algorithm as an engine for serendipity. They frame it as the joy of stumbling upon something new and unexpected that broadens your horizons.
The magic of the feed.
Right. But when we analyze the mechanics of algorithmic delivery, it is the exact opposite of serendipity. It is stochastic compulsion.
Okay, stochastic compulsion. That is a heavy term. Break that down for me.
Basically, stochastic compulsion operates on engineered unpredictability. The algorithm isn't selecting content to expand your knowledge base or introduce you to complex new ideas. It doesn't care about your growth.
It just wants engagement.
Exactly. It is optimizing for emotional activation. It serves up whatever specific stimulus will spike your dopamine just enough to keep your thumb on the screen for another 10 seconds. It's engineered novelty.
So it's fundamentally manipulative.
Yes. Real serendipity requires boundaries. Think about walking into a specialized independent bookstore or slowly flipping through a curated physical journal.
Oh, I love that feeling.
Right, because you have actively chosen the environment. You know roughly the parameters of the world you have stepped into, but you allow yourself to be surprised by the specific ideas you encounter within those walls. That's bounded intentional discovery.
And the algorithms just destroy that.
Completely. Algorithmic feeds destroy those boundaries, flooding the user with limitless, decontextualized noise.
So what does this all mean? This structural rejection of stochastic compulsion is actually the driving force behind the massive RSS revival we're seeing in 2026.
It's a huge shift.
We are tracking a deliberate, coordinated exodus away from algorithmic timelines. Journalists, academic researchers, and increasingly just ordinary users, they are actively cutting the algorithm out of the middleman position.
They're fleeing the filter bubbles.
Yes. They are returning to chronological feeds, where the user subscribes directly to the source. It shifts the power dynamic completely. The user regains absolute control over the dials of their own information diet. Choosing a curated list of 5 sources isn't limiting your worldview. It's how you actually get real discovery back.
Exactly.
But let me ask you, is this just internet nostalgia? Like, are people just missing the early 2010s Google Reader era?
No, not at all. This is a critical development because it is no longer being viewed through the lens of nostalgia. The return to user-controlled feeds isn't about missing old web design. It is being classified in 2026 as a current, forward-looking cognitive wellness movement.
A wellness movement. That's a huge reframe.
It is. When we look at contemporary wellness pieces focusing on the harms of short-form video, cognitive psychologists are explicitly prescribing the reintroduction of direct feeds like RSS and long-form podcasts as two halves of the same cognitive fix.
Wow, so the strategy really is brilliant in its simplicity. The direct feed provides the structural boundary that protects the user's prospective memory from algorithmic interruption.
Right.
And the long-form audio provides the necessary cognitive exercise to actually rebuild their sustained attention span, because you are no longer outsourcing your attention to a machine that is just optimizing for engagement.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, when you combine the structural boundary of a user-controlled feed with the cognitive depth of linear audio, you create the environment for modern initiatives to fundamentally change the purpose of digital content.
This brings us to Project Antaryami.
Yes, Project Antaryami. It perfectly embodies the Gurukul 2.0 ethos we've been talking about.
And Project Antaryami is so fascinating from a strategic analysis standpoint because it actively breaks every established rule of modern audience growth.
Every single one.
I mean, in an ecosystem where media companies are constantly trying to lower the barrier to entry, making content faster, punchier, more visually stimulating to game the algorithm, this project walks in the exact opposite direction. They completely abandon the pursuit of huge listener numbers and viral metrics.
Because the structure of Project Antaryami treats the audio not as disposable background entertainment, but as rigorous study material.
Study material.
Yeah. The episodes are constructed to demand the listener's full cognitive presence. They weave dense, layered information that structurally requires the listener to pause, process the concept, and often rewind to fully grasp the argument.
You can't just have it on while vacuuming.
No, it isn't designed to be passively absorbed. It is meant to be listened to closely, perhaps multiple times, by individuals who have recognized their own cognitive erosion and are actively utilizing deep listening as a rehabilitation tool.
By treating the audio as study material, they completely ignore completion rates. They aren't trying to engineer cliffhangers. There is a guiding quote in our source material that I think perfectly encapsulates this radical departure.
Oh, I know the one.
The creators stated, and I quote, "The goal was never virality. It was giving a few people back the kind of attention they didn't know they'd lost."
That philosophy redefines the value exchange between the creator and the listener. It shifts the metric from how many millions of people briefly glanced at this to how deeply did this alter the cognitive state of the person who actually chose to engage with it.
It's quality over quantity at the most fundamental level.
Yes. By respecting the listener's time and actively demanding their intellectual effort, Project Antaryami facilitates a pure, intentional connection. It is the structural antithesis of the digital slot machine.
So, to quickly summarize the scope of the digital migration we've audited today, we started by quantifying the mechanical damage inflicted by algorithmic short-form video. The 2026 meta-analysis of nearly 100,000 participants, alongside the specific findings from LMU Munich, demonstrated that rapid context switching physically degrades our perspective memory.
Right, transforming brain rot from internet slang into a measurable cognitive deficit.
Exactly. Then we explored the structural sanctuary provided by sustained audio. Because the auditory cortex processes information chronologically, deep listening prevents the shallow skip and skim behaviors trained by text on screens.
It forces our working memory to synchronize with the pacing of human speech, acting as that vital bridge back to sustained focus.
Right. And finally, we examined the 2026 migration to user-controlled RSS feeds, highlighting how people are actively rejecting stochastic compulsion in favor of bounded intentionality.
They're putting themselves back in control of their digital diets.
Which brings the audit directly back to you. Look closely at your own media consumption habits today. Are you actively choosing the ideas that enter your mind, or are you allowing a machine learning model to select them for you?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is. When you unlock your device, are you a deliberate participant in your own ongoing education, or are you defaulting to a reactive state, just letting the algorithm dictate your perspective memory?
This raises an important question, though, because the shift toward intentional systems is a powerful defense, but it forces us to consider the broader implications of these new boundaries.
Yeah, and I want to leave everyone with this final thought based on what we've unpacked. If choosing a curated RSS feed and niche podcasts is our new cognitive defense mechanism, what happens when an entire generation creates completely siloed, hyper-curated audio realities? We might successfully rescue our attention spans from the algorithms, but could we lose our shared cultural touchstones in the process? Think about it.